Yeah, and I think listening to some of the stuff that you had mentioned, Steve, about getting the perspectives of your staff, I think are extremely important now, particularly with AI. And we do a lot of trainings on AI, over the last couple of years here, and that's another area again where you have, everybody's kind of in a different spot in terms of their adoption, whether it be the district itself or just even individual teachers. And so I think those are extremely important things. So if we shift a little bit into EdTech trends and digital literacy, um, if you look at the way that AI has come about and has evolved in the last just year to 2 years here, and you're looking at K through 12 education, what, from your perspective, what are the biggest shifts that you've seen in technology and how it's integrated in those areas, both of AI and digital tools?
Well, the simplest thing is it's no longer supplemental, right? I mean, historically, technology was sort of supplemental to the core textbooks. It's now core to the instructional process, or hopefully it is, right? I had an English teacher tell me a long time ago when I was an assistant principal that basically, if we were a primitive tribe, I'd be the witch doctor. I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, right? I think it was a good thing. But we've progressed to the speed that, things continue to change. The Tech and Learning, news feed that I get every morning had like 3 articles about general things and then 6 different things about AI, because that's like the number one thing everybody's trying to learn. In AI is a tool, and it's a set of tools, right? And we're at the very beginning of that. If you look at like the 5 tiers of potential AI, we're not even really at tier 2 yet, where they'll start to have intelligent agents. I'm waiting because 2025 is supposed to be the year of the intelligent agent. Still waiting for it to really be there and help me. And that will be helpful, I think. But I think the bigger issue is we're moving from, we digitize stuff, right? But now it's how are you using the data that's being collected, right? We've all heard of big data. And so we've moved from, the internet to the Internet of Things. And now we're talking about the Internet of Behavior, right? And I think actually the Internet of Behavior, though it has real Orwellian Big Brother potential in one respect, right? It also has the ability to really help our students with special needs, right? So, just like right now you have a service dog that can identify potentially some issue with, somebody who's about to have a seizure. Wearable devices are going to be able to watch students and potentially identify before they act out, for instance, and really hopefully change some of the climate that we've had issues with students who have significant disability issues and have difficulty in the classroom, right? And that I think has potential. There's also the potential to, go too far and really, hinder students from being students. And so all of that has to be pretty balanced. And there are a lot of ethical issues that have to kind of be addressed through that. But being able to intervene in a behavior way may be better than having to just put kids on medicine, right? And so I think that next step of really digitizing or going to datization from digitization is probably where we're going, if that makes sense.
I was going to ask you quick, Steve. Have you heard of Manus yet? That one that got released like a week or 2 ago.
I have not.
So I just came across it. I haven't dug too much into it, but I just came across it like last week because we were putting a newsletter together. But Manus is the one that they're claiming is like the first general AI.
Okay.
I don't know what that all entails yet, but they had like I actually have. Let me see.
Well, it's interesting, yeah, because supposedly OpenAI has an AGI tool, right, an active general intelligence tool inside. Yeah. Well, and obviously these tools, right, are going to then be able to drive more intelligent tutoring.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And so that's, I think, a real potential because small group instruction can really change, right? If the student can work with a tutor and then a teacher, because there's still a need for human agency, all right? No matter what I say, don't interpret that to say that we want to get rid of the human teacher. We've been trying to do that since the 1500s, right? People have a book now. All the world's knowledge is at their fingertips, right? There's a old article called "Technology is Messiah" that was in Education Digest from like September of 1993 or 94, I think 94, that talked about the fact that, this was a speech originally that the University of Trier president gave at the beginning of the school year in like the 1560s. And I don't believe if it really did, because I've never seen the original document, but it's a great urban legend that we've been dealing with this issue forever. We're not going to get rid of teachers, right? There still needs to be a human to say, hey, this works, this doesn't work. But the ability to offload some of the repetitive tasks to a tool, that seems pretty exciting.
Yeah. So one of the things that you talk about is definitely this role of technology. That especially that I liked how you had said it's not a supplemental thing now; it's becoming a core, essential thing in order for delivering of instruction, right? And so then to me, something that is, I think, also a really important component that needs to go along with that is the digital literacy piece, right? If this is going to be a core essential thing that our teachers and our students are going to need to have, what do you see as kind of the important characteristics of that digital literacy that we should be providing?
That's an excellent question, right? And in fact, I've been thinking about that ever since David approached me about speaking on that topic in August, right? And I don't have a great answer yet, right? I still have a lot of potential, right? There's somebody just posted here the 7 literacies that people need to go forward, talk about, but it's definitely more than the tech skills, right? It's how do you build the critical thinking? As I've spoken to people about assessment, for instance, I've talked about really flipping Bloom back to the original version of Bloom, right? Which has, creating is now at the top of Bloom. Well, the generative AI tools can do all the creating you want. So we need to go back to analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. And those are sort of the key focus, I would say, going forward for assessment, right? If AI can generate the answer, it's probably not a good test question, right? And we know lots of people spend lots of time trying to figure out how to make kids not cheat at all levels, right? From kindergarten all the way up. But the issue is, how do they use those tools effectively to enhance the evaluation, synthesis, and and analysis, so they get good materials based on what's out there and can be generated, right? Like you guys probably aren't quite as chronologically hindered as I am at this point, but you don't have the issue of, when I went to the library to do my my composition paper as a junior, we were excited to find a couple of sources, right? I used to say I could have, today I could do my composition on 17th century bookmaking or bootmaking or whatever. And, I'd find 1,000 articles plus videos on how to do it in about 10 minutes. So it's the issue of how to go through cull and the critical thinking and media literacy to really identify these are the most important resources, right? They're supported. They're from good, reputable journals or, people, professionals in their areas, not, when we used to look for information on wolves, right, for a biology assignment, I'd say, if you find Bob's, lycanthrope website, don't give that a lot of credibility. Now, and I'm not trying to diss the werewolf people among us, but, that's not a great resource probably. Same concept, right? Look for where those sources are coming. And the other issue is, how do you integrate that digital literacy all through the curriculum, right? So it should never be a separate kind of thing. It has to be totally integrated. Again, another opportunity to really use those library staff and get them in there and make sure that they're helping people find information effectively, because their job is more important. Now we think, oh, get the internet. Why do we need librarians? Well, because there's too much information out there. They have to help you sort it. For my graduate students all the time, a great shout out to Kendall Larson and the rest of the library staff at Winona State. They are fabulous to help my students get through all the information and find what they need. But they have a set of skills that every student isn't getting exposed to, and they really need to be, right? And then the key beyond that is, okay, from digital literacy, how does that incorporate what we really need to know about cultural literacy, right? And that was one thing that survey I mentioned before about educators and AI. I was amazed how many people responded from the K-12 world, well, our district doesn't let us use those tools. Or, and I'd love to know who the individual is, so if they're listening to here, please reach out to me. There was an Ojibwe teacher who was talking about the fact that, nothing her students try to do with the language comes up properly in AI because there's such a small group of materials to train from, right? And so how is that going to have an impact on indigenous languages? And how are we to keep those cultures engaged as well in a world that's, I was in Iceland last summer and everybody speaks English and every student does. And they're like, well, because of the internet, right? And so we got to figure out how we're going to manage those other cultures. And I think digital literacy now has to be more encompassing of all of that process.
Yeah, I think it totally does. Otherwise, I think we run the risk here, especially as we progress with AI, of further expanding that digital divide. And it's not just along economic lines necessarily, or racial lines, but it could be culturally here as well. And I think you hit on a really good point there.